What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, January 16th, 2018, getting into the week. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room. Despite all the terrible driving weather all around that part of Texas, he made it in to get our show done. So thanks, Mike, for being there, and he'll take your phone calls when you call on in. Now then, getting on back to our little scare last Saturday here in Hawaii, the story is starting to get a little bit weird because apparently this morning, early this morning, meaning almost 24 hours ago on the other side of the date line, Japanese public broadcaster NHK issued a warning that a North Korean missile was inbound, then retracted and apologized. Now, once, that's definitely a goof. Twice, that's a head-scratcher. I mean, just 4 days after we had our mistaken public warning issued here. Now, another part of the story is starting to get a little bit weird because, as you know, there was a 38-minute delay between the time the warning went on out and the correction was issued through mass public communication. The corrections were up there earlier on the Emergency Management Agency website and various Twitter feeds, but the actual message out to cell phones and TVs 38 minutes later. And apparently Governor Aiea and the Emergency Administrator Vern Miyagi said they had to obtain permission from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Remember, we talked about that yesterday. Why was FEMA involved in this at all? And apparently FEMA is now saying that's absolutely not true. The state emergency management authorities are authorized to cancel or retract warning messages all on their own. So something's kind of weird going on there. All right, we got a caller waiting on the line. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Kevin, are you there?
Are you there?
Yeah, there. Oh, I hear you now.
Me? Okay. I'm glad to hear that you and Claire are safe. And a couple of things I wanted to ask you. The first one was this about the missile thing. And the other that I wanted to talk about was Trump's statements and things. The first thing about the missile warning system, do you think that this could possibly be trying to make Trump look bad? They're trying to say that the United States is weak and Hawaii's weak and doesn't have good leadership?
Well, if we stipulate for the point of the thought experiment that this was not just an honest goof here in Hawaii, then it could be one of several things. It could be an effort to just keep everybody's nerves rattled and war ready at a time when North and South Korea are demonstrably moving closer together. Or you're right, it could be done to make Trump look like he's not really taking the defense of the United States seriously enough. We're just going to have to sort of figure out what's going on here. But the fact that Japan got one just 4 days after we did, and there hasn't been an erroneous ballistic missile warning for a very, very long time before. Admittedly, they're just, starting to look for this ballistic missile warning system because at the end of the Cold War, they shut down the one they had before because there was one that they had before. But I don't remember any false alarms out of that one.
Right. I mean, I totally understand. The other thing that I wanted to comment on was this whole, can I call it crap hole instead of using the other word?
Yeah, that's probably preferable here. That's probably, but, the amazing thing is Trump has made it permissible for the corporate media and independent media to use that word. I choose not to, but go ahead.
I mean, even if he said it, let's be honest, he's right. He's right. I mean, it might not be the good language to use, but I mean, why nobody wants to go and vacation down in Haiti or all these other third world countries when they're actually coming here to make their lives better. They're getting away from it because it is a bad place.
Yes.
So I think he's right. And the also thing that I think about with this Twitter thing coming out, that was to squash, this whole thing with the Crapgate thing was to squash Twitter coming out. I, prayerfully believe, especially with the revelations of yesterday and on Monday too with Project Veritas. It's what's the word I want?
It's a distraction, and I agree. I agree. The fuss over Donald Trump's language is a distraction, but what they're distracting us from is the fact that he was asking a legitimate question. And the globalists, the liberals, do not want the American people thinking about that question, so they make a big deal about the language. Oh, we said a dirty word. We're all triggered. Get the Play-Doh. Get the poppers. Get our little safe spaces. We have to, and that's all it is. They don't want you to think about the question Donald Trump was asking because the vast majority of Americans would probably agree with him. So they're tarnishing the whole issue by saying he's using a bad word and hopefully that we won't think about what he was saying.
They did this once before, and during the O.J. Simpson trial, when they had the white guy standing up and saying the N-word 41 times in front of the jury.
Yes.
It's the same thing all over again. It's the same playbook.
Yeah, they were playing the race card and implying that if the jury convicted O.J., that they were just being racist. And, politics and lawyering are very dirty businesses. We all know that.
Well, Mr. Mike, that's all I have for you today. I thank you for what you're doing. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to say, I out of high school, I had joined the Navy, and I took the oath to defend the Constitution. My oath to defend foreign and domestic, my oath, there is no expiration on my oath. And I think everybody that's, been in the military or a veteran like me and everything else, we need to remember we stood up and we took a pledge, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's kick the political crap out of these people. We can do it.
Well, again, I don't advocate violent action. I'm still convinced this government is on its way to a Soviet Union-style collapse, and I'm starting to feel that it may not be all that far off.
I think you're right. Well, you and Miss Claire have a wonderful day, and thank you for everything that you do. Have a wonderful day, sir.
Thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go here. And we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And now that everybody is listening, I have a small announcement to make. Due to the meltdown and Spectre backdoors, whatever you want to call them, my hosting company that hosts the website, whatreallyhappened.com, has forced me to do a server upgrade. And that will be starting at the end of the radio show today. Hopefully it's only going to be a day or so, but we're not sure because different software, there may be issues. Hopefully there will not be. But obviously anything that is being posted to the website by the members right now will probably not be preserved. So just be aware of that. And we will have the server back up and running as quickly as possible. And then I need to seriously look at building a whole new website, mobile-friendly, because it's long overdue. It gets frustrating because everything's always updating and worse changing. I mean, part of my website got broken in the last PHP update. And computer companies don't seem to realize how frustrating that is. That's like if I buy a car tomorrow and then 6 months down the road they say, there's a bug in the transmission, we have to upgrade the transmission. And then they put in the transmission and say, there's a serious incompatibility between your new upgraded transmission and the engine, you're going to have to upgrade the engine. And then it goes into the radio and the dashboard and the windows and everything has to be constantly updated. And it is a little bit ridiculous when you think about it. So anyway, to recap, the upgrade to the whatreallyhappened.com server begins at the end of the radio show today. We will have it back up as quickly as we can, and hopefully there will be very few problems. But with the current state of hardware and software, it's impossible to make a prediction or a guarantee. Now, getting on back to what's going on with our missile scare here, our local Democratic representative, Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not in her district, unfortunately, I wish I was, basically is making the rounds on the TV shows, saying that the reason there's been some kind of a crisis with North Korea's missiles is because of the constant provocations and aggressions and goading by the United States government. That it wasn't until the United States government started making a big stink about this that there were any problems. Lots of countries are developing weapons of deterrence. Lots of countries are developing missiles and testing them out. North Korea just became an issue because it's an easy mark. And Tulsi's got a lot of sense. And I got to tell you, if the Democrats really had any brains, they would run her in 2020. Because she's looking better and better all the time politically. Now, getting on back to that whole immigration issue and DACA and the rest of it, Senator Chuck Schumer has now come on out after all this demonization and declaring that Trump is a racist and convinced that everybody believes it. He says, well, Trump can prove he's not a racist by supporting the Democrats' DACA amnesty bill, the Graham-Durbin bill, that would make DACA more or less permanent, even though Obama, when he created the program, described it as a temporary stopgap only. So it's a cheap shot, Chuck. I don't think Trump's going to go for it. And I don't think the American people, by and large, believe Trump is racist for a very simple reason. Illegal is not a race. And no nation has a totally open border immigration policy. That's an abstraction. It's an aberration. It is, in fact, an abomination. Now, getting into the domestic politics here, the House is now expanding their probe into Hillary Clinton's email, and they're getting ready to question the FBI director's chief of staff. And apparently the House Oversight Committee is confirming Jim Rybicki will testify as part of their investigation into Obama's Department of Justice probe into Clinton's illegally operated private home email server. So they're investigating the investigation. Now, either we might actually see something happen, or they're trying to whitewash the earlier whitewash. Yes, they botched the investigation, but they didn't mean to do wrong. It's kind of hard to know where they're going. We've seen a few people within these House committees, like Trey Gowdy, that appear to really be trying to do the job. But they are up against the vast majority of people inside the Beltway who realize that exposure of the Clintons means exposure of their own corruption. After 30 years of that cocaine connection to the CIA in Arkansas, a lot of people have gotten dirty with that. A lot of people have been using the Clinton Foundation as a tax shelter and a money laundry. And a lot of people had their fingers dipped into the pie at the Uranium One deal. So they're all compromised right now. Now, a story coming on out of Zero Hedge, the original FBI probe into the Russian uranium bribes was concealed by the Obama Department of Justice. And Mueller, McCabe, and Rosenstein were involved. And that's why Mueller is trying to find something he can get Trump with, because sooner or later, his role in the cover-up is going to be made public. Because there was an FBI investigation into corrupt business practices when that deal was being made. And there were even indictments handed down. The indictment that was announced a few days ago, that wasn't the first one. And there were others, and they were all plea bargained away, wrist slap agreements, very serious crimes. If you'll just plead guilty, we'll just make it all go away. And it was all hushed up by the Obama administration to help Hillary Clinton. And it should be brought out and made public, because the public needs to know what the FBI is really like. They're not the swell bunch of crime-solving Joes that you see in TV shows and movies. That's just more corporate media propaganda. Now, speaking of Robert Mueller, he's decided he's going to subpoena Steve Bannon, President Trump's former chief strategist, and he's been subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury as part of the investigation into Russia-Trump collusion. And I think what Mueller is hoping is that a still very ticked off Steve Bannon might be persuaded to say something that Mueller can get that grand jury to at least issue an indictment, to keep up the media campaign. Oh, there's something there. There's guilt there. Now, apparently, Durbin is out there making a lot of comments about what was going on in those White House meetings, including the one about immigration. But Tom Cotton on Face the Nation said Dick Durbin has an established history of lying about what goes on in the White House meetings. Okay. Over at Radio Sputnik, CIA officer turned political activist Ray McGovern basically said that the FBI should feel very embarrassed on all these Russian meddling claims, and basically said that this is a full-court propaganda press directed at the American people to convince them something is there, even though there are no facts. It's the big lie approach. Tell a lie that's big enough and tell it often enough, and eventually everybody will come to believe it, despite the evidence before their own senses. And we need to be aware this is currently being used on us. Now, for some reason, people are still going on about Oprah Winfrey running in 2020. And if I'm right, and Hillary is going to be running in 2020, then Oprah is going to have to stay out of small aircraft. But a lot of people are saying she's the perfect candidate for bleeding heart liberals. She's black, she's a woman. You know, she gives these emotional speeches that distort reality, not interested in the actual facts. And what's ironic about this is that liberals are denouncing President Trump for having been a billionaire reality TV star, and yet their ideal candidate for the next election is a billionaire reality TV star. Can you say hypocrisy, children? I knew you could. Now, the other day, we were talking about how Jeff Bezos has donated $33 million to provide scholarships for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, DACA recipients. And a lot of people were saying, why are you doing this when there are so many people in this country that need help, like homeless veterans or the homeless in general as this hard winter comes crashing down? But there's another category that needs to be added to it. Apparently, more than 700 Amazon employees have to rely on food stamps to feed themselves and their families because of the low pay that Amazon gives them. So Bezos just wants to look good in the media and feel good in the liberal establishment. I'm giving money to the DACA scholarships, but he's going to starve his own employees. It really is hypocritical. Now, as you know from some of the phone calls we got yesterday, Chelsea Manning is running for the Senate in Maryland, and apparently Maryland passed a law saying a convicted felon can run for office. And a lot of people are trying to make a big deal about, oh, the felony, the felony. You need to remember what the felony was for. Chelsea Manning was convicted of a felony for an act of whistleblowing that opened Americans' eyes to the atrocities being committed by the U.S. government. Personally, if she were running for senator from Hawaii, I would vote for her because of that one very heroic act and the courage to be willing to pay the price for it. A lot of people, amazingly enough, even the liberals are attacking her, for her sex change, which liberals aren't supposed to do. And because that one has fizzled out, the latest one coming out of the liberals is they're claiming that the only reason Chelsea Manning is running for the Senate, it's a plot by Vladimir Putin. It's more Russian interference in our internal affairs. Boy, do you not get sick and tired of hearing about that. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And right now taking place at the White House, they're having a press conference, and the subject is President Trump's health, and they're basically reporting on the results of his medical examination, which included a cognitive evaluation, which would make sense. Donald Trump's father had Alzheimer's, and the doctor's given him a clean bill of health. including the cognitive exam. And it is a very shameful display. The reporters there in the room are on the attack, challenging it, saying, well, we've had this doctor over here in Oklahoma who says Trump is this, and we've had this other doctor on the media out on the West Coast who says Trump is showing signs of this and that. And right now, Rear Admiral Jackson is out there saying, look, the only doctors qualified to tell you the condition Donald Trump is in are those who have actually met with him and conducted an evaluation. And he's calling all these media reports about Trump is going crazy and showing signs of stress. He's calling it tabloid psychiatry, and he's absolutely right. And I'm already getting emails calling the journalists at the White House pathetic, and I'm fully in agreement on that. All right, let's take a phone call now. David in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, great show as always.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know I had some past experience with military notification systems, specifically there at Hickam and other places there. And what I wanted to let you know is there may be a little more to the story about what actually activated, because a lot of these systems are integrated. They're tied to each other. And it's very possible there's something called the Common Alerting Protocol, CAP. And CAP sounds like a great idea on paper. And what it was the answer to having one person activate something, and then that would trigger automatically a lot of other activations. I would just postulate that it is possible that whatever activated that system might have come from somewhere else, and they don't want to talk too much about it. But I know that the military there, PACOM or others, have the ability to declare something that automatically sets off other things in motion. At what point, by the time somebody figures out what it is, what it was, etc., seconds can turn into minutes, and minutes turn into hours. Last thing I'll just say is anytime you have telephone notification systems that are part of the puzzle, there's a lot of latency, and once you get that process going, it could kind of spin out of control before anybody can stop or redirect it. Just want to throw that out. Hope everybody is safe out there in Hawaii, but never accept the official explanation. There's usually the news, and then again, there is the news. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. I tend to follow Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation is usually going to be the correct one. Not always, but it's always a good place to start. And there are a lot of people who thrill to find increasing complexity in theories about what's going on, and very often that will lead them off into just complete fantasies. In this case, my understanding, and I've been doing some digging and asking some people, is that the civilian state Hawaii Emergency Management Agency gets their alerts electronically from a variety of sources. Most of them are, of course, tsunamis, and those alerts come from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, which is also here on the island of Oahu, and, of course, weather alerts from the local weather and the Pacific Hurricane Warning System, which is also here on Oahu. In the case of the recently installed ballistic missile system, the two sources that feed into Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency is the Pacific Military Command, right here at Pearl Harbor, and FEMA, which is on the mainland. And so that is supposedly where a real message would originate. But again, the reason my first reaction to the message was that it couldn't be correct is the newly installed ballistic missile warning siren system did not sound immediately. And so that prompted me to turn over to the local TV news and radio news stations, where they would also get these alerts, inbound ballistic missile, and they'd be broadcasting it. And this lack of coordination is why I still tend to think that it was just a simple mistake. Now, somebody down at Pearl Harbor tripped off their sirens, and that's the moment when Claire and I weren't really sure anymore, and had, we had a few minutes there of figuring what we were going to do. Well, all we can do is shelter in place, except we're up on the edge of a ridgeline, but we do have water, we do have storable food. We're preppers, I'll admit it, and that was really about all that we could do. And I know from the nuclear effects calculator that we posted a few months back that a Korean warhead onto Pearl Harbor is survivable where we are. Same cannot be said for the Russian and Chinese warheads, but we're not dealing with them. But in the end, it turned out to be a false alarm. Somebody is still pushing the story that there was a false flag missile that was fired toward Hawaii, but it blew up and fell out of the air, and everybody decided to call it off and say it was all a mistake. Still can't figure out why they had another one like that in Japan earlier today. It's just not making a lot of sense. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to the news. Actually, I want to do a comment here. I'm surprised that this many days afterwards people are still talking about our false alarm last Saturday. I figured it was going to be good for one day or so. But I think it is having an effect on people where they're realizing that if we allow this government to persist in its current agenda of expansionism, imperial conquest, and warmongering, that we might get another warning that is real, the real thing. And we now know what that feels like here in Hawaii. And I hope people on the mainland are thinking things over, because it's not an abstraction anymore. It's the real thing. I just got to read a letter from somebody on Maui talking about how they were feeling about it. Even though any attacks on Hawaii would concentrate on Oahu, this is where all the military resources happen to be. Getting back to the news, getting over to the war zones, as it were. Apparently in Syria, the situation in eastern Idlib is becoming more and more complicated for government forces as both ISIS and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham are pressuring the Syrian Arab army and its allies. Now, apparently yesterday, ISIS captured a dozen villages southwest of the Abu al-Duhur air base and conducted several hit-and-run attacks on government troops in the areas of Uavjat, Kana, and Rasim Kushuf. And in southern Aleppo, government troops regained Abu Ruwawi and entered Mathamiya and Tal Shahid. So they're still going back and forth. But things may be getting ready to really heat up over there. Right now, Russia and the United States are literally engaged in a race to build the most military bases and expand their presence in the country. There's only one major difference between them. Russia has the permission of the government of Syria to be in Syria and to build bases. The United States does not. Now, the United States may be getting itself stuck in a real mess. They're committing to an occupation of Syria. And they're starting to bring in more militants. Some of these Syrian militants are in the United States seeking more CIA funding, ostensibly to confront Iran's influence in Syria, forgetting again that Iran also has the permission and blessing of Syria's government to be there. Now, a lot of these terrorists who are retreating from their positions in southern Aleppo and northern Hama are arriving in Idlib to try and slow down the advance of the Syrian army. And this next part is where it gets really, really dangerous. The United States is creating a Kurdish terrorist border force in Syria to define the borders of a new Kurdistan. In other words, they want to just carve off a piece of Syria and say, this is the new Kurdistan. Huzzah, huzzah. Erdogan over in Turkey is saying this amounts to the United States admitting to forming a terrorist army. And he's out there saying they're going to be dealt with, because Erdogan is sick and tired, first of all, of the problem with the Kurds, and he's very angry with the United States for the United States government support of the Kurds. And meanwhile, the U.S.-backed Kurds are mobilizing their civilians, saying that Turkey may attack at any moment. Well, there's no maybe about it, because according to this article in Zero Hedge, Turkey has notified NATO of an imminent massive invasion of Syria to fight the Kurds, to destroy Kurdistan. Kurdistan failed in Iraq, it's going to fail in Syria, and in the process a lot more people are going to be killed and crippled. And ramping up the rhetoric even more, this is coming out of the Syrian Foreign Ministry, in reacting to the U.S. pledge to create a new border force in northern Syria. They're saying the Syrian army vows to end the U.S. presence in Syria. So this looks real. This looks like the war is really going to crank up there. This is going to bring the U.S. and Russia together. And that's going to be a bad day. Apparently, Russia has begun a massive ICBM launch drill. And it's basically involving truck-mounted ICBM launchers all across the country. So they're sharpening their sticks. They're getting things ready to go. Meanwhile, Trump is vowing to renew all-out economic war on Iran. See, he's going to relaunch this economic war by no later than mid-May unless the European powers join Washington in unilaterally rewriting the P5+1 deal. Now, Europe is happy with the P5+1 deal. Iran is happy with the P5+1 deal. This is the United States unilaterally wanting to destroy the treaty and impose something even harsher. Something that not only would forbid Iran from having nuclear technology, which they're allowed to have under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they're trying to arm twist Europe into going along with it. And I can't imagine Europe's governments are all that happy with it. Now, it's interesting to see Israel, up until now, has been all in favor of this flood of migrants into Europe and in the United States of America, and it's a great thing. You know, why are you being so racist and unkind? Meanwhile, in Israel, they're acting quite differently. They're kind of tired of their African migrants, many of whom are Ethiopian Jews, and legally have a right to be there under Israel's basic right of return law. Anybody in the world who can prove Jewish ancestry can come into Israel and be a citizen. But Israel seems to have changed its mind in reference to the Africans. And Netanyahu is now calling them infiltrators. And he's asking officials to examine the feasibility of forcibly deporting thousands of African migrants. So migration is good for the rest of the world, but we've got to keep Israel pure. Now, Palestinian leaders have voted to urge the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It's still around. It's a lot smaller and weaker without Yasser Arafat. But basically, the PLO, trying to make peace, did at one point recognize the state of Israel without the reciprocal deal of Israel recognizing the state of Palestine. And so the PLO is basically being told, stop recognizing Israel unless and until they recognize the state of Palestine. And that has been the standoff all along. Israel goes on in, they grab a chunk of Palestine, they set up shop and said, we're Israel, everybody recognizes us. Harry Truman does so. And then Israel turns to the neighbors in the region and says, we demand you recognize our state and our right to exist. And they all say exactly the same thing. Certainly, as soon as you recognize our state and our right to exist. And with regard to Palestine, Israel refuses. Because Israel ultimately wants all of that land. And that's been the sticking point. That's been the cause of all the wars and the bombings and the missile strikes and the shooting of fishermen and the jailing of Palestinian children. Because Israel wants Palestine to recognize its right to exist, but will not return the same thing. And if Israel would only grant to Palestine the same thing it desires for itself, all of this adversity and hostility and bloodshed could have been avoided. Now, probably a lot of you have forgot that we seem to have some wars unfolding down in Africa. And apparently we have some kind of military forces representing us in most of the nations of Africa. They're not doing anything. They're just stationed there. But right now there's a lot of focus on Niger It's a nation roughly twice the size of Texas, and it made the news a while back when there was an American force that was ambushed there in Niger, and now it's cranking on up. So basically the Pentagon is getting ready to escalate the situation. They've got 800 U.S. troops supporting Niger's military as they fight so-called militant groups. And many of these troops are Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Marine Raiders. But the reinforcements have been mostly Air Force personnel there to manage a surge in surveillance flights by unmanned drones and manned spy planes. Apparently they spent $50 million for an airfield in Niger. So what's going on? Why is Niger so important? Well, Africa as a whole is the last remaining reserve of undeveloped natural resources. And Niger has a lot of minerals, including gold, and you know how desperate the American banking system is to come up with some gold to make up for some bad choices they made with other people's gold a while back. So it really is a world war. We're in World War III. Now, North and South Korea, despite all the rough talk around them, North and South Korea seem to be moving together very rapidly. They're putting down the hostilities. They're going to be celebrating the Olympics together. The North Korean and South Korean Olympians are going to be in a unified team. They are the Korea Olympic team. That's a very important symbol. Remember, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in is very much in favor of the Sunshine Policy. He wants to reunify the Koreas. North Korea has resources. South Korea has industry. It would be a win-win for both of them. It's outsiders like the United States who want to keep that DMZ in place because it would prevent the Chinese Road and Belt Project from reaching down into the Koreas to lower shipping costs for Korean products to reach Europe. And then North Korea is sending down, apparently they have this very famous team of cheerleaders. I'm not real big on cheerleaders, so I'm not up on them. But apparently they're world famous. They're going to go down to the Olympics. And now North Korea is sending one of their finest orchestras, the Samjuban Orchestra, to South Korea. It will perform in Seoul. These are all important symbols of the two Koreas wanting to come back together. And the U.S. is desperate to stop that. Meanwhile, Russia and China are urging a freeze to any more confrontation on the Korean Peninsula. They're saying it's time to pull back from all this. I think everybody in Hawaii who heard that ballistic missile warning on Saturday would be saying, yeah, freeze it, freeze it. Let's tone this thing down. But the U.S., despite pretenses of diplomacy, seems to be heading back to the old habits. At bases across the United States, the military are going through exercises specifically designed for war in North Korea. We've bases all across the United States, and they're training for a war in Korea, specifically for a war in Korea. The U.S. is moving more warships and bombers near North Korea ahead of the Olympics, even though the U.S. had said they were going to stand down until after the Olympics. Apparently, the USS Wasp, an upgraded U.S. Marine Corps amphibious assault ship, arrived in southern Japan on Sunday. It's carrying the F-35. And the U.S. Pacific Air Forces have deployed 3 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, along with 200 personnel, to the island of Guam. Now, North Korea is calling Donald Trump's nuclear button boast the bark of a rabid dog. And given the translations and everything, I have to agree. Considering that Trump campaigned last year on pulling back from all these interventions, to hear his aggressive, provocative talk today, it is very alarming. And Trump doesn't understand the Asian concept of face. You can reach a point of insult at which the Asians, specifically in this case the North Koreans, feel they must take action. There are many cultures that have that. They don't have the turn the other cheek. You insult somebody's mother, in Russia, you're going to be in big trouble. There are certain cultural lines you cannot cross, and Donald Trump is dancing dangerously close to some of those. Now, Japan is tightening their patrols around North Korea at the request of the United States to hopefully interdict more oil tankers and gas carriers trying to get into North Korea to get around the embargo. So for all the talk about diplomacy with the U.S. is still maintaining these aggressive, provocative actions. And I guess everybody understands what's really going on. China's official military newspaper is warning war is not far. And it says war is not far from us. Regional situations around China are complex and unstable, and dangers are hiding under the peace. China cannot afford a military failure, so we must be fully aware of a potential crisis and be prepared for battle at all times. It's a typical thing you say to the military, but there seems to be an added intensity going on. Dangerous times that we live in. They're still going on with this White House press conference about Trump is very, very healthy, and he did very well, or actually they say exceedingly well on his cognitive screening. And the White House reporters are out there saying, well, we've got all these TV doctors and TV counselors and saying he's just gone batty, fruitier than a nut cake. Let's talk about the economy. Some interesting developments there. Apparently, as the petro-yuan looms, the Bundesbank has decided to add the renminbi to their currency reserves. So now the German bank is starting to acquire Chinese currency for their reserves. This is just days after China was rumored to threaten to stop buying U.S. treasuries. Now, China is denying that it's going to slow down or stop buying treasuries, but it's out there somewhere on the horizon. One thing China actually did do is they have downgraded the U.S. credit rating from an A- to a BBB+. It's just one notch down. But they're warning that U.S. insolvency would detonate the next global crisis. And just to make sure the message is heard, China has basically put the U.S. economy on a negative outlook, saying the U.S. is unlikely to pay off all their debts. We knew that. We'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and getting on back to Trump's exam. Apparently, Trump himself requested the cognitive evaluation, again, because of what happened to his father, and he scored a perfect 30 out of 30. That's the report that we're getting, and hopefully that's going to tamp down on these people who are thinking they can get Trump out of office with the 25th Amendment, but they're still pushing on Russian collusion, hoping to be able to impeach him. And if the Democrats take the House this November, they're going to impeach him. They don't even care what reason they have. They'll impeach him because they think his hair is outrageous for an American president. All right, getting on back to the economic news. The Empire Fed Manufacturing Survey has tumbled for 3 straight months, dropping to a disappointing 7.7 in January. And actually, I'm going to have to take this back. This is an older article that somebody sent me thinking it was current. That does occasionally happen, so we have to be very careful about that. However, I would not presume that manufacturing is doing very well, especially after what they're now acknowledging was another disastrous holiday shopping season. Now, Bitcoin has taken a hit. I confirmed this one myself when it came on out. Bitcoin tumbled 20%. Over concerns that more and more countries are going to start cracking down on cryptocurrencies in general. And we know that the private central banks do not like cryptocurrencies because they operate outside the control of the private central banks. They are not loaned by the private central banks into circulation at interest. And that's how private central banks make their money. They just create money out of thin air. They loan it to you at interest. and then you have to work to find the additional money to pay that interest, which means you are now the slave of anybody who's got big, tall stacks of that ink and paper stuff. That's how it works. It's a system of enslavement. Now, a lot of concern about oil prices. They've been rather dramatic lately. And there may be a seismic shift on the way, because usually you talk about oil and they talk about the global benchmark of Brent crude oil, WTI. But apparently there's a Siberian oil blend. It's called ESPO, and it's selling at enough volumes where it may take over as the new global benchmark. And if that happens, the world fuel and energy market will shift significantly in Russia's favor. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call just before the top of the hour. Alex in Florida, aloha, what's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I was calling. Well, it's good to talk to you again. Sorry it's been a while, but I've been listening. Anyway, I wanted to call you about the false warning about a nuclear weapon going to your state of Hawaii.
Yes.
And I believe that it was an intentional act to see how Trump would respond. Maybe
well, Trump simply responded saying it's a state agency, not a federal agency, and he's correct on that. Alex, going to have to let you go. We got to do our station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news. And Venezuela held a meeting of the Bolivian Alliance and is urging other countries to adopt its new oil-backed cryptocurrency. And the nations involved are Antigua, Barbuda, Bolivia, Cuba, Dominica, Ecuador, Nicaragua, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, St. Kitts, Nevis, Grenada, and Venezuela. So Venezuela, having been victimized by the dollar-centric Western economy, is now trying to set up their own, with their own group of nations to conduct commerce among themselves without it being siphoned off or bled off by private central bankers in other countries. Now, Uber has a new service out called Uber Eats, where you can call an Uber driver to go pick up a food order at a restaurant and bring it to you. It has, unfortunately, developed a little bit of a problem. And a lot of people were just not getting their meals. They would order online, they'd pay with a credit card, they'd call Uber, and nothing would happen. It would simply go away. And Uber had been operating on the principle that if the driver couldn't find the address, well, they were just sort of, free to go their way. It turns out a lot of very desperate people who have cars are signing up to be drivers for Uber Eats, and then they're eating the food. They're stealing the food. And I understand necessity is the mother of invention, and I don't think people ought to be hungry, whether they're working for Uber or for Amazon, Jeff. But at the same time, you need to be very, very careful. And if you are unable to get out and pick up your order, which is going to make it cheaper anyway, then do business with a restaurant that has their own dedicated delivery service, because if something unfortunate happens there, you can go back and complain. Now, getting on back to Trump's comment about various countries being black holes, he really needs to look a little closer to home. There was a very unfortunate article that came out of 12160.info about how San Francisco is literally turning into a blank hole. And in this article, there's literally a map of the downtown area showing the problem of defecation on the streets, sidewalks, in the alleys. And they're saying it's a combination of the immigration problem, it's a combination of the homeless problem, It's the fact that there has been a decline in the number of available public restrooms. I mean, biology is biology. When you got to go, you got to go. And something does need to be done. And it would be nice if we could resolve some of these issues. Close the borders and spend some of this money we're currently spending on war to bring our infrastructure up to handle the present population, because that is a big part of the problem. Our population has been growing since the 1950s, and yet there hasn't been significant increase in the infrastructure since then. As housing density increases, water systems are becoming strained. As volume of traffic increases, roads are more rapidly being damaged, but nothing is really being done. And the same thing applies to the illegal immigrant homeless population. There's got to be some place for them to go, and there isn't. And again, as the population grows, eventually the entire sewage system will be overwhelmed. It's not being expanded. So, well, apparently good news for somebody in this country. The 450 Mega Millions jackpot was won by a single winner, 20-year-old kid. And all I can say is I hope he is a reader and listener of what really happened, and presumably a donor. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. Let's take a phone call. Mike in Arkansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's Mike in Alaska.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread it. Okay.
It's okay. Yeah, hey, Mike. I've been out in and out listening. Have you brought up the Goldwater rule?
No, I have not.
Which is, you know, this whole thing of diagnosing people over the television, that came up with Barry Goldwater as well.
Oh, really?
And they made a rule and said you cannot, it's called the Goldwater rule, you cannot diagnose someone you've never met.
Well, we had that notice from the American Psychiatric Association saying, yeah, all these psychiatrists or psychologists who are out there saying Trump is showing symptoms of this, of that, if they haven't met him, if they haven't conducted an actual exam, they should shut up. It's unethical. They could actually lose their license. And that was also being reinforced during today's press meeting at the White House. These people are out there practicing tabloid psychiatry. They're just wildly guessing what they hope to be true, and they don't really know what they're talking about. But I didn't know it went all the way back to Goldwater.
Yeah, I think it was that whole Daisy, and then with the Daisy commercials, and then saying he's nuts, and we're going to, they did the exact same thing. He'll get us into a nuclear exchange with Russia. And, you know, he did lose pretty dramatically, but after that, enough people kind of said, you know, can't do that, it's actually called the Goldwater rule, and it's the same playbook, Mike.
Yeah.
So, Mike, they found out one of the Chan, I think it was either Chan or Reddit, they went after the one, it was an Asian lady, I think she was from California, and she was with the talking heads about he's crazy, and I've diagnosed him, and I've seen he moves his eyes to the left when he says this, it means he's schizo, and they found out she doesn't have a license at all.
Yeah, we reported on that last week. I mean, she doesn't have a current license. She used to have a license. She's trying to get it reinstated, and her other license had expired. So, yeah, she can't even practice in her own state, let alone all the way across to Washington, D.C.
Mike, all I have to say is I'm glad you're safe down there, and great show. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad I'm safe, too, and I'd like to keep everybody safe, which is why I hope this false alarm of a ballistic missile inbound is a wake-up call for all Americans. If we don't stand up to the neocon war machine, it could very well happen for real. So, anyway, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. Getting on over to Europe, Great Britain, Nigel Farage is out there trying to get everybody to wake up over what the European Union is trying to do. And we've been hearing all this talk about federalization for quite a few weeks now. But Farage is out there saying the European Union wants to create a unified union that will take away all remaining power from the current member states, just like the federal government in this country did to the states here. If you go back and you read the Constitution, that's not what we were supposed to have. The states were supposed to have the authority. The states were supposed to be self-governing sovereign states in a loose coalition, and all Washington, D.C. was supposed to do was keep them all working friendly, arbitrate in disputes and so forth. And the central federal government didn't have any power and authority other than during wartime. Couldn't even keep a standing army. Look how far we have declined from that noble vision. So anyway, Farage is on the warpath here, just days after Germany's Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel basically saying that Brussels will take over the entire continent. So all of a sudden, for globalists, the Germans are starting to sound very imperialistic again. Okay, story out of the Express in Great Britain, basically talking about how the European project is destroying the ordinary life of Europeans. Well, certainly it is economically, and certainly it is culturally, and that may be intentional, but basically a leading German politician is delivered an attack on Angela Merkel, saying that effectively Europe is dismembering itself. All the uniqueness that makes Europe Europe, all the uniqueness that makes those European member states who and what they are, it's all being taken away. It's all being blended together. Forget about free travel. In a little while, there won't be a reason to go from France to Spain. It'll be exactly the same. The same blended together group of people, the same fast food restaurants, the same supermarkets. And it will be a bit of a cultural loss here. And just to share an anecdotal story here, Claire and I have lived in Hawaii for a very long time now. Longer than we originally intended to, but it's just the way that worked out. And Hawaii, when we first got here, there was actually a lot of diversity, and depending upon where you went. And the shopping malls would always have these little kiosks where local artisans could present their wares, bowls, leis, things like that. You saw them in the modern malls. You saw them at Aloha Tower. And going down Waikiki, you would see these small stores, small restaurants, local food. That's all been erased. And right now you go down Waikiki and it looks like the shopping street of any other major city. The same big name brand stores. If you ignore the palm trees, you could very easily be in Manhattan or you could be in Las Vegas. And the small local entrepreneurs, they're basically out. The only place they can go to now are the various flea markets, and even those are starting to disappear. We used to have a flea market at the bottom of the hill. Every Sunday, the owner of the property has decided he can make more money renting it out as an overflow lot for the car dealerships. See, the 2018s are coming out. Actually, they've been out. And the dealerships are still full of 2017s. They don't know what to do with them. So they've rented this huge lot down at the bottom of the hill. It used to be a multi-screen drive-in movie theater. It's a very large space, and it's full of cars, just full of cars. Now, apparently, they're talking about a poll exit, you know, the difficulty that Poland and Hungary are having with Brussels. But observers are saying that there almost appears to be a growing split with all of Europe, with the conservative Eastern Europe and the liberal Western Europe pulling apart. And that could be the beginning of the end of the EU as well. Now, up in Germany, leading members of Germany's Social Democrats are now expressing skepticism, over this preliminary coalition agreement that they reached with Chancellor Angela Merkel's conservatives, just days after Merkel was hailing the deal as a breakthrough. But it looks like it may not happen after all. And Merkel, may be forced to hold new elections, which he is probably not likely to win this time. Meanwhile, George Soros is out there again saying that he's going to renew his fight against this dominant ideology of nationalism. And he warns the EU is on the verge of a breakdown. Actually, I think the Europeans would think that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with nationalism. The only people who think nationalism are bad are those who want to turn the entire planet into a single kingdom for themselves to rule over. One global throne, one private central bank to enslave all of humanity in hopelessly unpayable debt until the end of time. Those are the only people who are in favor of it. National borders serve a very useful function. They serve the same function that fireproof doors do in buildings and watertight bulkheads do in ships. They contain mishaps. If you have an office fire, the entire building survives. If you have a leak in a ship, one compartment is flooded, the ship as a whole remains afloat. If you prop open those fire doors and lock open those watertight hatches, it may look like things are better because you can get around faster, but the first fire will destroy the entire building, and the first leak will sink the ship. We saw a taste of that back in 2008 when the mortgage-backed security meltdown should have been confined to the American financial sector. But because of the already existing economic globalism, it spread to Europe and it hammered their banks. It spread all around the world. We need borders. We need borders so that if one nation gets into trouble, it doesn't wreck the rest of the planet in the process. And the other argument I have about a global government is you make that throne of planet Earth so attractive. People will do anything to get it, and once they get it, they'll do anything with it. It will only be a matter of time until a new Stalin or a new Pol Pot or a new Hitler sits on that throne, and there will be nobody else on Earth to rise up to oppose them. I'm absolutely opposed to globalism. I think Earth ought to be a planet of hundreds and hundreds of equal-sized nations, each taking care of their own people and engaging in some limited trade across their borders for those items they can't produce for themselves. And, of course, tourism, and celebrate their own indigenous culture, their own indigenous beliefs. So, Soros, I know you love the idea of creating a single global government that will enshrine your memory forever, but I don't think it's going to be very good for ordinary people. I mean, look at Alexander the Great. He conquered what was then the known world, didn't realize there was more that he'd missed, and they still honor him. He united the known world. Actually, he didn't. It fell apart right after he died. And, of course, the people living under Alexandrian rule, well, it wasn't always pleasant. Now, latest word out is that Homeland Security Secretary Kirstie Nielsen is saying that the Department of Homeland Security has asked federal prosecutors to see if they can lodge criminal charges against sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate with federal deportation efforts. I think it would be a really good idea. But I question the language. Charges against the cities? I think it should be charges against the controllers of those cities, the mayors and the other officials, or the governors in the case of sanctuary states. Bring Title VIII to bear on them. We'll get something done. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Sarah in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I called once before. I used to live on Kauai.
Yes.
So when this incident happened over the weekend, you know, I had so many friends directly affected by it, and I, you know, was very concerned, and my heart was with them. So just in the days that have followed up, I guess Trump really didn't have much of a response to it. He took his time about it too. And he said, oh, well, it's a state matter. The state handled it fine, something to this effect.
Well, he's right.
And,
he's absolutely right. This was a mess-up at the state level, the State Emergency Management Agency, and assuming that it was just a goof on a computer menu, they botched it. 38 minutes later, and they botched it. And yeah, this is Hawaii's to own. The federal government has little to say about it. FEMA's already come on out and said that no, in point of fact, they didn't need FEMA's permission to cancel an erroneous message. And it doesn't make sense that anybody would need FEMA's permission to cancel an obviously false, erroneous message. So yeah, Trump wisely and prudently stayed out of this one. It's not really his problem to deal with.
Well, except, I mean, did you hear this, that in Japan they received the same alert?
They received one earlier today.
That was reported on.
Yeah, they received one earlier today. Okay?
No, on Saturday.
Well, keep the timelines. It wasn't at the same time, though. No, they did not receive one on Saturday. We received one on Saturday. All right, stay on the line, Sarah. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And if you would like to support Republic Broadcasting and keep us on the air, the postal address to send your support, check, money order, something like that, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. If you want to call on in and become a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And we all thank you for your support because we need it. Now, getting on back to these notifications, I agree it's weird that we had two of these, but I did go out and check, and Japan's false alarm went out on their Tuesday morning, which would have been our Monday morning because of the international date line. It gets a little hard calculating it, but it was definitely not at the same time that Hawaii's false alarm went out. And interestingly enough, it only took Japan 5 minutes to correct the error, as opposed to 38 minutes here in the United States. And they're saying exactly the same thing. The system that was set up, and all of this is new equipment in response to all of this saber rattling, the system that would send out the notification was incorrectly operated by one of their staff. So that's basically it. Yes, there were two of them. They did not happen at the same exact time. Sarah, are you there?
Hello. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Anything to add to that?
Can you hear me? Yes. I was on social media on Saturday, right when it was all happening, in the hours that followed, when everybody was very, very upset. And that's when somebody said Japan got a notification alert too. So I heard that on Saturday. I don't know about the one you're talking about today or yesterday today. Maybe it happened again.
There's no report of an alert in Japan on Saturday. There's one report of one false alarm, and it took place on their Tuesday morning. I'm sorry. Whoever was on social media was just having fun with you, I think. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And it is somehow, sometimes, very unsettling. How many people just like to get on social media and just throw all kinds of garbage and nonsense out there, especially at a time when people are trying to get the real information about what's going on? Because this was a serious event. Apparently, quite a few people here in Hawaii, especially on Oahu, were sending text messages, we're all going to die, I love you all, and so forth and so on. You really have to wonder what kind of a human being will come into a situation like that and say, what can I say to make things worse? We're going to mess them up. It does seem to happen. And it goes back to that issue where our culture is so obsessed with money that we've lost our moral compass. And there used to be a balance. Yes, we wanted to have money, but there were other qualities, other moralities, if you will. And they've all just kind of fallen away. And this lust for the money, or this desperate need for the money to keep the bankers happy, has destroyed all the best characteristics of what we used to call being an American was all about. Getting on back to immigration issues, apparently there was an incident up in Toronto, Canada, where there was a young lady who claimed that she was attacked and her job was ripped or torn or slashed, and everybody picked up on the story. CNN, the Huffington Post, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, BuzzFeed, and they were all covering the story. And Canada's Prime Minister came on out and said, oh, this shows how we've got to be much more tolerant of the Muslims. And the Toronto police came on out later and said, actually, no, it was a hate crime hoax. And I think more and more it's becoming obvious that there may be a few genuine hate crimes, but I think more and more of them, they are hoaxes for the propaganda value. So everybody wants to grab the attention of the media and exploit it to get their particular message out. Speaking of which, BBC is now out there asking the question that if you do not want to date transgender people, does that make you transphobic? This is political correctness way out there. And apparently one of the responses they got to this question is somebody said, you know, would you as a male go out with a transsexual woman? And this one respondent said, I believe it's your choice and I would choose not to. You know, it's almost like the decadence just before the fall of Rome, isn't it? It really is. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And somebody just sent me an article. It's back in the economic section, but I want to go with it today. Apparently, during the dip in cryptocurrencies today, a lot of people said, time to buy in, buy the dip, which does make sense for active investing. But there's this article where somebody's out there complaining that MasterCard declined the attempt to purchase some Ethereum. You know, how dare they do that? And this has to do with loss mitigation, risky transactions, and a lot of credit card companies, if they think what you're doing carries a certain risk, they will block the transaction. And in this particular case, I'm on the side of MasterCard. Nobody should ever borrow, especially at the high interest rates credit cards charge, to invest in anything. If you want to invest, and it's a good idea, but you should work to have investment capital. That means cash that is outside of what you need to live on. Cash that if you lose it will not disrupt your life. And that you can go play with. And hopefully it'll turn out very well. But for people to whip out their credit cards and buy cryptocurrencies on this dip, that is very reckless. And I think MasterCard made a good call on this one. I really think they do. And again, studying the history of the crash of 1929, one of the things that really spread the damage so much was how people were buying stocks on credit, on margin. And the credit terms were very generous. You just had to pay 10% of the price of the stock, and the rest was on credit. And then when the stock market crashed and the margins were called and the people didn't have it, and that's what really caused the Great Depression of the 1930s. And it's very disturbing to see similar behavior again. Okay, story coming out of the Anchorage jail. Apparently, the state government has now admitted they've had a system to record jail conversations between suspects and defense lawyers. And apparently, there's a monitoring system in a certain visitation room at the Anchorage jail, and recorded conversations between attorneys and defendants in criminal court without anyone knowing. Lawyers are upset, and they have a right to be, because there is something called lawyer-client or client-attorney privilege, where they must be allowed to have discussions in private so that they can be candid with each other, where the defense lawyer can say, did you really do it? And the suspect can say, yeah, I really did. And the lawyer says, well, we're going to plead insanity or some other thing. But that's one of the founding principles of justice in this country, is that lawyers and their clients are allowed to have that privacy. And here we have the Anchorage jail was eavesdropping on lawyers and defendants in criminal cases, and one may safely presume that this information being gleaned by the system was being handed over to the prosecutor. That's tacky. That's very tacky. I always thought much more highly of the Alaskans than that. But on the other hand, they gave us Sarah Palin. This sexual assault thing is really getting crazy. There was another one on Fox News right now where this girl is out there saying that her date repeatedly cajoled her into sexual acts, and she felt horrible, and it was the worst night of her life. And people are saying, okay, why did you stay after the first one? Why didn't you call the police? And it's another one of those cases where it's so fashionable to be sexually assaulted that women are taking consensual dates and reimagining them as a horrible experience. And it gets back to something I said many, many years ago on this issue of rape. And I think I repeated it again when we were talking about that app that you can have on your iPhone where everybody commits to sex before you do it. Men will understand no means no, as long as women understand yes means yes. And they can't feel bad about it afterwards and say, no, in hindsight, I was raped. That really is not very civilized behavior. So anyway, there was this Larry Nasser. He was a doctor for the USA Gymnastics Olympic team, and apparently he was caught abusing some of those gymnasts. And he's coming up on his sentencing hearing. And one of his victims, Michaela Maroney, wanted to testify at the sentencing hearing about what happened, but she's not going to be able to, because when the settlement agreement, $1.25 million from the organization was settled in December 2016, it included a non-disclosure agreement saying that she cannot talk about what happened to anybody, or it's a $100,000 fine. That's a pretty ill use for a non-disclosure agreement. I understand you got to have them, protect your business secrets, but to protect the guilty, to protect your organization from a scandal that you allowed to happen, it's pretty much out there. Okay, it is now official. According to the CDC, flu is officially an epidemic in the United States of America. It's all over the place, and apparently they're saying more than half of all U.S. states reported high flu activity within the first week of the year. And looking at the chart that's in this article, CDC is getting the numbers with a delay because it is running wild all over Hawaii, and CDC is still showing Hawaii as a state with a low incidence. It's not the case. I have a friend whose father had to go to the hospital, and they put him on a gurney out in the hallway because they completely run out of beds. So this is a nasty one. It is a nasty one. And if that's not enough to worry about, there is rising concern over this disease that is swept across Uganda. Now remember, there was an outbreak of the Black Death, bubonic plague in Madagascar last year. And it did cross into the continent, and it did infect some of the other African nations. But now there is a new illness that has broken out in Uganda, and the first known victim is the 9-year-old girl who was bleeding from the eyes. Now, that is not a symptom traditionally recognized with the original bubonic plague. It's definitely hemorrhagic. And so they're going to have to deal with that. A lot of illness out there. Boy, what a year it is. Volcanoes, tsunamis, phony ballistic missile warnings, hemorrhagic fever, flu. terrible. Okay, let's talk about computers, since we're talking about viruses and things like that anyway. Warning for Windows 10 users. Apparently scammers have started putting out fake patches for the Meltdown and Spectre problem, and they're actually just filled with malware. They're not going to fix Meltdown and Spectre. They just load your system with malware. And I guess they're taking advantage of the fact that Microsoft's update servers are currently overloaded by people trying to get the genuine patches. So you need to be very careful about any software you put on your computer. Because speaking of epidemics, it's not just flu. It's scammers. It's cyber criminals. They're all over the place. They think this is cool to do. They see themselves as pop stars because they can break into computers and wreck stuff. And so far, the government's letting them do it here. But even the real Meltdown patches have problems. And as a matter of fact, some hardware vendors are being told, don't do them just yet. Because apparently, in industrial control systems, the patches are causing instability issues. It's causing systems to lurch. In other words, the normally smooth motion of these industrial systems being controlled, it's now hesitating. It's hitching because the processors aren't running as fast. So digital control vendor Wonderware is admitting that Redmond's Meltdown patch made its Historian product wobble. What a mess this has turned out to be. And if I am correct, and Meltdown and Spectre were NSA-mandated backdoors, look at the damage they have caused worldwide. This is even worse than the malware that they put out to wreck Iran's centrifuges, which then broke into the wild and caused damage to industrial systems all across Russia. Asia may have even contributed to the extent of the damage at Fukushima. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine.
Great. Will Lady Claire be around on Friday?
We don't know yet. She seems to be doing a little better today. She had a rough night last night. She's got to go to the chiropractor tomorrow. We're going to be talking to him about what's going on. She'd love to do the show. She's missing all of you. But our top priority has to be getting the Lady Claire back to being the Lady Claire. Because, again, I went through this issue of back injury with my first wife. I've been down this road before, and so we have to be very, very careful.
Pinched nerve, sounds like.
No, she's not showing symptoms of pinched nerve. It's just all the back muscles are knotted up. There's a vertebra that is not where it should be. And the chiropractor did put the vertebra back in last week. It may have popped out again. Claire did go to church on Sunday, and she moved in a way that I didn't think was advisable. So, again, we're going to get her checked out tomorrow. If the chiropractor can't do it, then we're going to have to see a spinal specialist. But the more she rests, the chiropractor says she's got to move around and walk a little bit, but she can't really overdo it. And unfortunately, this chair here I don't think is the best that she could be in. But we'll hope for the best. She'd like to be here. I can't make a promise right now.
Well, here's hoping. So anyway, with this Spectre and the processors, Mike, what exactly could this do to Wall Street with their, thousands of a second trading software algorithms?
Well, if they are using these Intel-based systems for their computers, it's going to slow them down. For anything that is computationally intensive, and these algorithms are, the slowdown can be as much as 30 or 40%. Now, Wall Street can make up for that by simply buying more computers and racking them together. But everybody's going to feel the impact of this.
Maybe it was meant to be that way, right? Didn't Kaspersky months ago, they said that this existed in Intel's chips.
Yes, they did.
They said this stuff was right on die. It wasn't software. It was right on die.
Yes.
So, I mean, it goes to show you how far we've come in actual programming. We can program now at, with the die shrinks. What are we at, like the 12 or 14 nanometers now?
Yes.
We can actually embed the software into the silicon because it's so small. We can do that now.
Well, look at like the Raspberry Pi. I mean, being somebody who started with computers in the days of like the IBM 1130 and these big gigantic machines, it's just stunning to hold this little tiny card in my hand and realize it's a fully operational Linux computer system with HDMI and everything else on it. It's a fun little gizmo. But again, I don't think that these were bugs. I think these were NSA-mandated backdoors because they're simply in too many of these chips, too many varieties of chips, to be a simple engineering mistake.
Well, Mike, you know it's not an engineering mistake. This is intentional.
I agree.
The only reason people are even aware of it is because, it's been compromised. So, now they've got to double back. They got to backtrack. They got to start making up some kind of lie to cover this all up. I'm sure they already had the lie thought up when they intentionally did this.
They probably did here, but we almost need. I would rather have safe and secure and standard than blazingly fast with all of these add-ons, because that's how this opportunity opened up. We've reached the theoretical limit for speed on a silicon-based architecture. And so the chip manufacturers are adding these new systems on board, little boxes on the side, if you will, like speculative processing, trying to guess what's going to happen so they can get there faster, plus a lot of other stuff for security. And in these little individual independent systems that sit on top of your CPU, that's where a lot of nasties can hide, because they are invisible to the end user. You can't get at them. It takes special equipment, a special mount for the chip to be able to go in and talk to those added-on systems.
Oh, it's amazing. You know what, Mike? I wish I were younger in this world that we live in, but sometimes I'm glad I'm not. There's so much out there. There's so much to learn. And yet, you get these kids, they're walking around with their heads buried into these phones. To talk about chiropractors, look at their necks.
Yes.
I mean, I can see this being a really big business in the next few years, right, Mike?
I absolutely agree.
And they got the world at their fingertips, and they're just in a daze.
Well, that was actually part of the sales thinking behind the Google Glass, is to keep people's heads up, to keep them seeing the world around them. The problem is they made it too expensive and it didn't catch on. I thought they were cool. I wanted to get one. I simply couldn't afford it.
Did you try one?
I tried one at a show once, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, there's something else. Anyways, I thanks for letting us, giving us a little update on your wife, and I hope she's, doing better really quickly.
Me too.
Thanks a lot for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And, yeah, sometimes I think our technology has become too complicated. We've reached the point right now where Google's AIs are being used to design new AIs, which means we're coming up on a period of time where our technology will be unknowable to human minds. And I think at that point the danger of it spinning out of control cannot be ignored any longer. The thing I loved in the old days about like the Commodore VIC-20, which I still have, one person could understand it all and make it work and fix the problems. We'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, the FBI, of course, as you know, is engaged in a war on encryption. They don't think anybody should have a Fourth Amendment right to privacy. And they're starting to get into name-calling. They're branding Apple jerks for making iPhones too difficult to crack. And apparently one FBI official has become so frustrated with Apple's iPhone security, he's described the product as the work of an evil genius. look who's talking. Now, here's the reality. All this talk about the need for encryption to spy on ordinary people just to be able to get the terrorists is utter nonsense. As we demonstrated in our NSA challenge, real criminals and real terrorists can quite easily come up with systems of encryption the NSA cannot crack. And that's the reality. And that means that all of this desire to spy on law-abiding Americans by the government is a symptom of a government that has grown very much afraid of their people. We're not buying the lies anymore. We're not doing what we're told. We're not cowering around their ankles and feeling like our lives cannot go on without the government around to protect us. That's what they're worried about. We're breaking free. And they're trying to just keep looking at us, partly to see if anybody's planning to do something nasty, but mostly to try and just scare us back into silent obedience. The Gestapo pulled the same thing on the German people. They deliberately cultivated this myth that the Gestapo heard everything, they saw everything, they smelled everything, they could even read your mind. And of course they couldn't. They didn't have anywhere near enough people. But it was designed to try and scare the German people into staying silent and not speaking out against the government. And unfortunately, in Nazi Germany, it worked. And we know what happened. The Germans lost their country. Don't make that mistake again. Another black eye on Facebook. Facebook is out there trying to make sure that they're banning conservatives and, anti-immigration people. But apparently there are drug dealers who are openly peddling drugs to children using Facebook. And apparently it's not unique to Facebook. This is coming from the Daily Mail. Criminals are trolling for business on Facebook and other social media giants, including Instagram and Twitter. And, of course, they're all busy making sure that those conservatives are being blocked and shadow banned. Boy, oh boy. There is a new version of the Mirai botnet. It's called Okiru, and it's hunting for ARC-based kits. Basically, this is the first nasty able to infect CPUs running the ARC technology. And these RISC-based ARC-embedded processors, they're used in a variety of Internet-connected products, including cars, mobiles, TVs, cameras, and more, and turning them into botnets. So if you're wondering why your modern electric car isn't driving all that well, it may be busy sending out nasty mail. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we have a caller waiting, Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, Brendan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm just calling about this new wave of censorship that's going on.
Yes.
Specifically, YouTube. They recently censored a gentleman. I'm not too familiar with his work, but I've come across it because I am a aerospace enthusiast by nature. It's Crow 777. It's Crow with 2 R's, and they just recently shut down his account for a video that he posted quite some time ago, which was simply, he does high def of the moon, and there was a video that he posted that had some weird waveform, and I don't know if you've seen it, but I encourage you to look it up. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are. First of all, what the wave might be, and second of all, why would they pull down a video that was posted years ago? Not just pull it down, they canceled his account. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at the videos right now, so in point of fact, his channel has not been taken down. Frankly, I'm looking at some of these videos, and I think his theories are a little bit out there. But I'm more concerned about YouTube censoring political content as we hover on the edge of a war. But again, I'm very concerned that they are not apparently policing criminal activity taking place on their social media platforms. I remember many, many years ago, we got blacklisted by PayPal because of our political content, and I fired back pointing out how PayPal was perfectly happy to do business with all kinds of pornography sites, including one that was selling child pornography. And PayPal reinstated us, and they've been very polite to us ever since then, and they have now spun off a second payment system specifically for the adult trade so they can keep their main image squeaky clean. There's a lot of hypocrisy and double standards going on in social media. All of this is being politically driven. The politicians want us to, get the liberal side of what's going on. The politicians want us to see the reasons to go to war. They don't want us to see the arguments against war. They don't want us to see conservatism. And the other issues just aren't all that important anymore. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And getting on back to computers, apparently, Transmission, which is one of the most used non-commercial BitTorrent clients, has a vulnerability that allows outsiders to gain control over people's computers. And the flaw affects users who have remote control enabled with the default password. Yeah, that's definitely something you shouldn't do. If you have some reason to have any kind of a system allow for remote external access and control, change the default password. And this vulnerability was revealed by a Google researcher who plans to disclose similar remote code execution flaws in other torrent clients as well. Now, researchers over at Princeton and Purdue have come up with a rather unique way to paralyze a computer, and this is from outside. Now, this is still a proof of concept, and hopefully it will stay that way. But apparently they have discovered that if you put out low-frequency noise at the exact correct frequency, you will prevent a hard drive from working correctly, because it'll start resonating and shaking and the read-write head won't hit the tracks correctly. Obviously, solid-state drives would not be affected by this, but apparently they successfully showed they prevented a closed-circuit TV system's digital video recorder from recording the camera signal. The obvious implication being that somebody could play a low frequency prior to committing a crime and not be caught on the security cameras. Solid-state memory is starting to look really, really good. Now, Amazon has yet another plan to intrude into your home. They have this so-called EchoSpot smart alarm. It's an alarm clock for your bedroom that also has the built-in camera and microphone. One of the things they're claiming it will do is when you are dressing, it'll tell you how well you look, whether your shirt goes with your pants, if the tie is really appropriate, and other things. But obviously it opens up the possibility for somebody to be peeking into your bedroom during your more intimate moments. No way would I have one of these in my bedroom. Actually, I'm not going to have one in my house. I don't even use Siri on the cell phone. It really is getting overboard. And to prove that, another story out of the Daily Mail, apparently the latest cars include sensors to basically make sure the driver is okay. We know that there have actually been alcohol sensors on some cars for a while. But apparently automakers, yes, they can track your vehicle's location. They're tracking how fast you drive, what entertainment you listen to through internet-connected systems, where you're going. The newer cars can even look at your eye movements, measure the weight of the people on the front seats, the weather on your streets, and keep track of where you prefer to eat. All of this, of course, sold to online marketers. I really think there should be an opt-out on that. I really do think there should be an opt-out. I understand advertisers want this information, but let them come and ask. Don't turn our appliances into spies for the enemy. Don't turn our cars into spies for the enemy. Don't turn our appliances into spies for the enemy. that really is crossing a line. We do have an inherent right to privacy. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because what we do in the privacy of our own homes is nobody else's business. I really get sick and tired of people who come on in and say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. Oh, okay, let's put a TV camera in your bedroom and see what you do with your wife. You're not doing anything wrong. You shouldn't have anything to hide. Oh, that's right, Amazon just did that. We're going to do shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Apparently, Canadian authorities have arrested an Ontario man for operating a website that collected stolen personal identity records and credentials from some 3 billion online accounts and sold them for profit. As we found out yesterday, one of the customers may be corporations who are stealing identities and using them to post on comment boards on pending litigation to try and fool the government into thinking the American people want more of our consumer protection laws taken away. But according to the RCMP, 27-year-old Jordan Evan Bloom of Thornhill is the person behind the notorious LeakedSource.com, a major repository that compiled public data breaches and sold access to the data, including plain text passwords. Now, LeakSource started in 2015, had 3 billion personal identity records and passwords from some massive data breaches, including LinkedIn, VK.com, Last.fm, Ashley Madison, MySpace, Twitter, Weebly, and Foursquare. And if you had the money, you could go on in there and you could just buy all this data that you wanted. And LeakSource was shut down and its social media accounts suspended after they cracked down on the operation earlier last year, and it looks like they finally tracked it back to the guy who did it. And they've arrested and charged him. Well, good for the Canadian RCMP. If the Canadians can do it, why can't our people do it? Is the U.S. government ready to admit that its cybersecurity is inferior to the Canadians? Inferior to Dudley Do-Right? Okay. Another article from the Daily Mail talking about as the capabilities of robots and AI continue to grow, a leading scientist has warned the machine takeover will lead mankind into a hellish dystopia. This is coming from Dr. Subhash Kak. He's a computing expert at Oklahoma University. And he says employment provides people with a sense of self-worth and value. He's absolutely right. This trend toward automation of replacing humans with machines, it may look good on the spreadsheet in the short term. In the long term, it is a disaster of epic proportions. We will wind up literally with shopping malls full of robot sales assistants filled with robot manufactured products standing, and the robots will be standing still with nothing to do because nobody will have the money to buy those products. This is a bad idea. And there could be a public uprising against the robots, and it wouldn't be the first time. Look at the origin of the word sabotage. This during the early Industrial Revolution, when handmade products were starting to make way for machine-produced products. And there was a protest in the Netherlands. Workers would take their wooden shoes and jam them into the gears to wreck the machines. The shoes were called sabots. The French for shoe is sabot, hence sabotage. It could happen again. And there have been a lot of cases of frustrated or worried employees deliberately sabotaging complex computer systems to protect their jobs. It's a natural reaction. I'm not justifying it. I'm saying expect it's going to happen at some point in the world. What do all these corporations think they're going to do for customers once all the employees have been replaced by robots? It doesn't make any sense. It's so incredibly short-sighted. And yes, having a job you feel good about is part of the social glue that holds our system together. People are supposed to feel proud about their jobs. That's how it was when I was very young. When you had a job, yes, there was the money, and it was enough money to run a household. And on top of that, you felt good about what you did. You were proud to be a carpenter or a plumber or a foundryman. But our society today, unless you're one of the elites, you're just looked down on. And one job doesn't provide enough money to run a household any longer. We're headed in an absolutely disastrous direction. Somebody who is inside the financial system of this country has to wake up and realize that. And say, if we're going to be around in the long term, we have to change course. Of course, if they're thinking that there's going to be a collapse in the near future anyway, they're just going to be grabbing all the gold and silver and other people's silver where they can and heading for the doors, heading for the Cayman Islands. All right, let's talk about some science news here. A lot of volcanic activity going on. Over in Bali, both Mount Agung and Mount Sinabung have erupted to life. And they're sending these thick plumes of smoke and ash into the air. This is over in Indonesia. And it's causing a lot of problems. Flight paths are having to be diverted. They're not the only place. Over in the Philippines, their most active volcano, Mount... hang on, I had it here in just a minute. Mayon volcano. Mount Mayon has erupted. More than 12,000 people have been ordered to leave a 4-mile evacuation zone. And there are warnings of destructive mud flows called lahars and toxic clouds, meaning pyroclasts. So these mountains are definitely getting their rocks off. And Mother Earth is definitely having a tear. I mentioned the other day on Saturday that in addition to the scare from the missile alert, that night there was a big quake near the coast of Peru, 7.2 magnitude. And we were getting all these alerts that there could potentially be a tsunami from that. Ultimately there wasn't, but that kept us awake at night as well. So there's a lot going on here. Okay, let's talk about quality medical care. There is a lawsuit that claims a surgeon at West Haven Veterans Affairs Hospital left a scalpel in a patient. And apparently this happened 4 years ago. Now I looked at the x-ray that they illustrated the story with. It's a scalpel handle. It doesn't have a blade, or the guy would have died from internal bleeding a long time ago. But apparently this poor veteran was just years in pain, and the lawsuit is seeking unspecified compensatory damages, and it's claiming the veteran, a guy named Turner, suffered pain, needed the additional surgery to get the thing out of him, hospitalization, prolonged rehabilitation, medical expenses, and lost work time. Now, we have a doctor in the family, and believe it or not, under duress from my mother, I briefly considered a medical career myself. And one thing that you do, and this applies to a lot of things, whether it's surgery or repairing your car or repairing your computer, you do a tool count before and after to make sure something hasn't been left in the patient, that you haven't left a wrench in the gear train, that you haven't left a screwdriver shorting out the bus on the computer. It's a very simple thing. And I thought nurses were trained to actually do that. When they set out prior to surgery, they do a tool count. And when it's all over, they do another tool count before they close. Silly, just silly. Story out of Zero Hedge. Quoting a new report from the Environmental Working Group, apparently tap water for more than 170 million Americans contains radioactive elements that may increase the risk of cancer. The group examined 50,000 public water systems throughout the United States and found that between 2010 and 2015, more than 22,000 water utilities reported radium in treated water. Now, obviously, radiation in tap water poses serious health threats, particularly for children and women during pregnancy. Now, this appears to be coming from some outside source. radon gas does occur naturally in buildings. It's one of the dangers of having a basement that's not properly ventilated. And today, along with your fire alarm and quake alarm and carbon monoxide alarm, you can actually get radon alarms to sound a warning. Radium, though, is a byproduct of processing uranium. If you go back and you study the story of Marie Curie and how hard they had to work, how much uranium they had to process to get just a tiny smidge of radium, this is not something that's just popping up in the water from deep in the earth. It doesn't exist in the earth in isolated form. So are we looking at more contamination coming out of America's nuclear waste sites like Hanford? Now, this article, unfortunately, did not say where specifically they found the radium-contaminated drinking water, but that's something that you really need to know. This love of nuclear weapons is causing huge damage. We may not need to wait for an actual radioactive nuclear war between radium in our drinking water, other toxic radionucleotides coming out of places like Hanford, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Fukushima, the above-ground nuclear tests. After a while, yeah, you're going to see, that may be the reason for the epidemic of cancer, along with certain food additives. Now, over in China, as you know, they suffer from high pollution levels. They're trying to retrofit some of their factories with better air quality, but they've come up with a rather interesting solution. They're building, in the city of Xi'an, in Shaanxi province, they're building an outside air purifier 330 feet tall. It's going to be right in the middle of the city, sucking the air in, taking out the pollution, and putting it on back out. Very ambitious project for the Chinese. And the Chinese do some amazing things. They also have a sense of humor. Somebody sent me a video of this glass bridge in China. The floor panels are transparent, but they have digital screens, and when you step on them, it projects the image of a crack. If you're not ready for it, it's going to scare you. And I saw the video of people just grabbing onto the handrails, and as soon as you step off, the crack disappears. It's just very, very funny. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call now. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, very good day to you, Michael. Yeah, Michael, what's on my mind? I was watching the hearing today with the lady from Homeland Security, Kristen, whatever, and I'm looking at these schmucks, Schumer and Durbin. Now the thing with Durbin, he said he don't know if Trump said a hole or a house, S house, or was it an S hole? So right there, that goes to show you that Durbin's full of it.
Yeah, well, apparently Senator Perdue is out there saying he was at the meeting. Trump did not use that word. So apparently they made this up, put it out there so that they could declare Trump a racist, so that Schumer could come in and say, well, the only way you can prove to us you're not a racist is to go along with the Democratic version of the plan.
Correct. Well, let me ask you this, Michael. I don't want your audience to maybe they can weigh in. Michael, is Schumer and Durbin, are they, do they have dual citizenship with Israel? Durbin, because I know they're both Jewish. Are they dual citizens?
I don't know. I think Schumer has spent his entire life in this country. I mean, technically, under the universal right of return law, he could be an Israeli citizen anytime he wanted to be. But yeah, there are so many other countries who prevent dual citizens from being in the government. It boggles the mind that the United States does not take that same sensible precaution.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why are they the only group of people on earth that are allowed to have dual citizenship and be a United States senator? That's an interesting question to know. You know, it's really perplexing to me. I do know that Israel has a wall around it, Michael, of taxpayers' dollars.
Absolutely, and it's amazing. Everyone says Israel's wall is good, but Trump's wall is bad.
Exactly. And take the guns away from the American citizens, but everybody in Israel walk around with an Uzi.
Yeah, and the U.S. government is giving guns to the Mexican drug cartels at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Yes, that's correct. But the real another main reason I did call you, Michael, and I want to ask your opinion because you know a lot about this. This judge on Ninth Circuit that ruled for DACA, can Trump have him arrested for some kind of clause in articles in the Constitution where this guy's overstepping his bounds as far as if Trump says, hey, no, listen, I'm the supreme commander, and I'm telling you, no, these people are going to go back if I say they're going to go back. Who's this federal judge dictate to Donald Trump?
Well, you're absolutely right. The judge is overstepping his bounds, but the primary responsibility of any judge is to enforce the existing laws. And I think a proper course of action would be pointing out that in supporting this, DACA, it's a violation of Title VIII. The judge is failing to enforce the immigration laws of this country, and he could be removed from the bench. Trump can fire him, which I think would be a better way to go than to have him arrested. But we are seeing a situation where the government is fragmenting. It's factionalizing. You have all these little individual groups and cliques and everything fighting amongst each other, which is only going to hasten the downfall, the final collapse.
It's going to lead to civil war. But, Michael, let me ask you a question. If another federal judge right now tomorrow come out on Donald Trump's side and says, no, listen, all these DACA recipients they all have to go to their country's origins. I don't care what anybody says. I'm a federal judge, and I'm going to rule in Donald Trump's favor that they all go back. And this other judge has his order. No, they're not. What would happen as far as another judge overstepping in another district court saying, no, this was never an intended law. Obama broke the law by even allowing this, and Donald Trump's 100% correct, and he has all the authority to send all 800,000, 900, whatever million of them back. And a federal judge stood up tomorrow for Donald Trump on his behalf. What would actually happen?
Okay, well, first of all, judges in other districts can't weigh on in because the way a lawsuit proceeds, it's filed in a particular district and it proceeds up through the lower courts to the higher courts until ultimately, if the issue is contentious enough, it winds up in the United States Supreme Court. So the only judge who can overrule this judge is a judge that sits above him.
Okay, so... Okay, like I believe in the 9th District, they're representing the western side of the United States. What about an eastern federal judge on the eastern side of the Mississippi who say, no, Donald Trump's 100% right. These people are here illegally. They broke federal law. They have to be deported out of here. So I was wondering how Harry Truman was able to do that in the 50s. In 3 years, he got rid of almost 2 million of them. How did Harry Truman pull that off?
Well, you've got two issues. First of all, judges in other districts don't have standing on this particular lawsuit. So they really can't say much of anything. All they can rule on are similar lawsuits brought in their districts. And yes, it would create a bit of a crisis where there are deportations over here and sanctuary over here. And you're right, it could lead to a civil war. Now, back in Harry Truman's time, and also in Eisenhower's, when there was a responsible immigration policy, we've got to, we're coming up here on a commercial break. Tom, stay on the line. We're going to come back to this issue right after the commercials, and then we have another caller waiting after you. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Tom in Florida. I'm already getting emails on this issue. Somebody wrote on in, according to the Constitution, judge's servitude is contingent upon good behavior, not necessarily for life. And Congress can impeach judges for bad behavior. Unfortunately, too many in Congress see what the judges at the Ninth Circuit are doing as a good thing, stopping the president from enforcing the immigration laws of this country, because the Democrats are now openly admitting they're relying on having millions of illegal immigrants vote in the elections and vote Democratic, even though under the law they're not supposed to. They're gaming the system to hang on to power and to hang on to as much of your money as they possibly can.
Michael, there's some news on, this came out over breaking news. The Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows and the Freedom Caucus says if Donald Trump doesn't get the $9 billion to start, they're not going to sign on to DACA, and they're not. If they don't get and chain migration in the visa lottery, the Freedom Caucus is all out. They're not in. So that's wonderful news. They want $9 billion down payment on the wall. So I'm just going to see what's going to happen Friday with this, because the way the Freedom Caucus is talking now, this ain't going through. In the House, I don't know about the Senate side, but in the House side, it looks like the House is going to stand strong, and there's no way. Either the Democrats are going to cave in with the $9 billion, the end of chain migration and lottery, or I don't think there's going to be any kind of deal. I think eventually, Ann Coulter's going to be correct on this. I think they're going to have to send all these people back. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, Israel, if it's okay for Israel to send their unwanted migrants back, why is it not okay for the United States to do it?
And they're sending a bunch of Africans back out of Israel.
Yes, including the Ethiopian Jews, who technically have the right to be in Israel.
That's correct. And supposedly they're guarding, I guess, what is it called, the Ark? I don't know.
Well, that's what they're claiming. That's what they're claiming. But since nobody's allowed to peek in and look, we don't really know.
You know, Michael, before I hang up, I know you got another caller, but one more thing. I think if Donald Trump would really send a message, if he was to go get the federal marshals to go get Jerry Brown and indict him for what he's done with the sanctuary cities. Because to me, this sanctuary city is where it all lies. The linchpin is in the sanctuary city. You take away that sanctuary city nonsense and prove that that's against the law, it's breaking federal law, I guarantee you, these Democrats will be singing a different tune. They'll be singing a different tune once that sanctuary city ends, and Donald Trump says, hey, listen, there's no sanctuary city. That's like saying you ought to have sanctuary cities for bank robbers and car thieves and people who want to steal food out of stores because they're hungry.
You're absolutely right. They're all criminals. They're all criminals.
They're all criminals. So
yeah.
What is the difference between an illegal and breaking law? So
okay,
I'm going to see how
your
this
phone
play out. It's
connection
very
keeps
interesting to me because
your phone connection keeps breaking up every once in a while. I don't know why.
Yeah, probably listen on me. I don't know, Michael. You know, I don't like touchy subjects, but I tell it like it is. I'm not afraid. But, you know, let's just see what happens. And by the way, Michael, I want to tell you one more thing. Haiti is a stinkhole. I just had a friend who went over there. He got deadly sick. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks because he went over there.
Yeah, so there are nasty places on Earth. And, again, the focus is on the wording that Trump used so they can label him racist and basically prevent Americans from realizing Trump asked a perfectly reasonable question. And again, it's all about needing all these illegal immigrants and refugees to vote Democratic so the Democrats can take the Congress and the White House back. It's just blatant gaming the system. And it's not democracy and it's not a republic. It really is third world dictatorship on full display for everybody to see. All right, Tom, we're going to let you go. And before we take these next two phone calls, interesting article just posted by a member at whatreallyhappened.com. Apparently, Microsoft has a patent now for a brain interface device. And supposedly it's a band you would wear around your head that would decode your EEG signal, and it would allow you to operate your computer without needing a keyboard or a mouse, or even a voice interpreter like Dragon Speak. You can use that to control your computer as well. Apparently, Facebook is working on the same thing. So now it's a race to get it on out there. My first thought when I heard this is this will be a boon for quadriplegics. This is going to really be a good thing for them. So I hope they can make it work. I really do. I don't know that I would want one. I don't even use the Dragon speech system to control my computer. I'm old-fashioned. I use a keyboard and a mouse. I only gave up using plug boards about 5 years ago. Let's go back to the telephones here. Roxanne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, aloha. I just wanted a quick comment on the Trump or this statement, the blankety-blank whole countries and whatnot. But what I really see it as is especially Haiti in the Clintons. That brings that Assange thing back into the light. That's what I see it as. And because the mainstream, lamestream, fake news, whatever they are, their debacle has backfired again on them. So it's all about the Clintons again.
Yes.
And I hope Lady Claire, we both hope that Lady Claire is going to feel better real soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Lady Claire seems to be a little better today, so but it does take a while. Injuries to the back just take a long time, and it's just a reality. Okay, back to the phones. Benedict in Iceland. Aloha, Benedict. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. I'm phoning here from Iceland. Reference to the Black Death. When the Black Death came to Iceland, it came with a ship coming from Europe. One guy had died on the way. They took the dead body and buried it, and people started getting sick. There was no rats in Iceland at that time, and no fleas from rats, so it couldn't spread that way. But then one farmer on a mountain pass here in Iceland decided to take weapons and stop all people crossing the mountain pass. And that stopped the Black Death. So here you can see that it isn't go by rats.
Well, so nobody ever said it was carried by rats anyway. It was carried by fleas. And originally the story was that the rats were carrying the fleas, but as a matter of fact, there was an article that came out just today saying that by far it was human-to-human flea transmission that spread the disease rather than the rats. The rats were just a convenient scapegoat, and I'm sure the professional rat catchers made a lot of money doing it. Now, are you telling me that they buried this one person who died from the Black Death in this mountain pass?
No, they buried in a cemetery, just like normally. But then the people start getting sick afterwards. They didn't get sick immediately. That's why it spread.
Well, I mean,
so it was not very. It's not very contagious, because if it was very contagious, then all the people on board the ship would have been sick when they came, but they were not. They got sick afterwards.
Well, some people were immune. I mean, that's why everybody didn't die. But the rate of infection, the R naught, basically went up the higher the population density. And yes, on board a ship, it's very dense, but it sounds to me like that was a cargo ship. So there was a small crew, and they probably had, plus they had fresh air blowing on through. It's not an environment that you would think fleas would do well in. But certainly in some of these crowded medieval cities where they were all packed into these very small rooms and there was no air and very little fresh water, the fleas could just go crazy. But again, the rats are off the hook. The rats were not only not carrying the disease, it turns out they weren't the majority carrier of the fleas either.
Yes, I think it has to be investigated further. Maybe it was an airborne disease or something like that. I don't know, but
well,
has to be looked a little
maybe,
further.
But I think we need to spend more time looking at the diseases we have here right now, whether or not this new one in Uganda is a whole new hemorrhagic fever, or if in fact it's a mutated version of the Black Plague that broke out on Madagascar last year.
That's true.
Okay.
And thank you for taking my call. And I hope everybody will get well. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go and take a phone call from Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I'll check my answer off there. Has anybody seen the whereabouts of Hillary Clinton? Because I know there were some rumors, some conspiracy theories, reports, whatever, going around a while back during the holidays that she had been, she disappeared, basically went off the map. I don't know if she's made any public appearances or anything like that. I just wonder if you knew.
No, I have seen absolutely nothing. I would imagine that as some real genuine investigations appear to be cranking up, that Hillary is probably spending all of her time reminding everybody of how vulnerable they are to the Clintons' blackmail, and they may be making contingency plans for a bailout if one of these people who have been indicted in Uranium One or any of these other things decides to turn state's evidence. The Clintons will never be prosecuted. The best that we can hope for is they'll flee the country to someplace without extradition, and that will be the end of it. Okay? I guess we lost Frank. All righty, getting on back to the news. It's time to talk about human-caused global warming, and it's especially poignant today because Houston is under a winter storm warning. And as a matter of fact, earlier in the day I got a call from one of our people at RBN saying that the weather was causing problems. They weren't sure that people were going to be able to make it on in. And to that I would add, after this show is over, I'm certainly hoping that Mike is going to be very careful driving home because apparently the roads are very slick. The last weather report I saw, the snow had actually stopped around Round Rock, but of course there's accumulation and the rest of it. So let's see. Cold start to week, snow possible midweek. Travel advisory issued for icy, snowy Cayuga County. Snow emergency declared in Sterling, Illinois. And I saw this story was on the corporate media where the Coast Guard has an ice cutter in full-time operation on the Hudson River. And this is the first time they've had to do this in decades. Yes, there'll be ice on the Hudson River, but it's small pieces, and every once in a while they'll have to go out and break up one large chunk, so it's not a threat. But in this case, they're having to deal literally with the entire river being sheeted over, and the ice is, in places, it's a foot thick. And the gist of the story they were talking about is this is a new icebreaker that they're working with right now, and they're just going back and forth trying to keep the ice in chunks so that other ships with ice-rated hulls can get on through and carry out their commerce. Over in Wisconsin, they're dealing with ice quakes. And apparently around Fond du Lac County, they're hearing these explosion-like sounds. It's rattling windows. And it's ice quakes. And they're sometimes called cryoseism. And normally you would find this in glaciers in the polar regions, but it's caused by water that sinks into the soil and bedrock where it freezes solid, and when ice freezes, it actually expands. And that will cause an explosive popping sound that feels like a mild earthquake. Most chemicals and elements, when they go from their liquid to the solid state, they increase in density. Water is very unique. When it goes from its liquid to its solid state, it decreases in density. It expands. That's why your ice floats on top of the soft drink instead of being down there at the very bottom. Apparently, temperatures hit minus 62 degrees at a village in Siberia. And it's the village of Aiea, and it's the coldest permanently inhabited settlement in the world, and they're used to the cold, but this was record set. Actually, this was the second coldest temperature since 1933. And it was so cold, ice crystals were literally forming on their eyelashes. I saw this photo of this very bundled up child, and the eyelashes were just this amazing snowflake array. It gets that cold, people do interesting things like they'll take a pan of boiling water and throw it into the air, and it instantly turns into snow. Apparently, they have had ice storms, hail, down in Tasmania in January. And what makes that unusual is that, of course, down below the equator, this is their summer. And they're still getting hailstorms. Let's take another phone call here. Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. This is kind of a self-serving question, but I didn't want to ignore the fact that there's a date that could be significant, and I'm just kind of curious. Is there a specific date when our planet is on its orbit is the farthest from the sun? Is there a specific date for that, like January the 23rd or February the 3rd or something like that? Is there a date
there
for
is.
that?
I don't recall what it is off top of my head. It's called the apogee, rather the aposole of the orbit. And yeah, the Earth's orbit does vary a little bit, but the seasons are caused primarily by the Earth's tilt and less by the distance of the sun. But again, over
Okay.
long periods of time, as the Earth's orbit oscillates from much more elliptical to much more circular, that is what causes the ice ages versus the interglacials.
So it's the same date every year, really, or does it vary?
It varies slightly. There's a little bit of precession in it. And again, it's part of the problem that our earthly calendar doesn't exactly line up with the solar calendar, which is why we get leap years, leap days, leap seconds, and so forth and so on. They try and keep it in the same date.
Sorry.
Okay?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I think that might be significant because remember I came up with that word and it meant the farthest from the sun, and I thought maybe the date was important. You know, I mean, I just want to cover all bases. I don't know if you're following me.
Well, you know what the analemma is, right? That's the figure-8 shaped pattern that the sun traces in the sky over the year. And you'll even find it on a lot of globes because it's used to calculate time offsets when you're calculating your time from the sun. Okay?
Okay.
All right, we got to take another break. We got to take another break for commercials. Thank you for the call, and we'll be right back with one more phone call and the end of our show. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And in response to Sherry's phone call, I did a little work over the break here. The Earth is closest to the sun 2 weeks after the December solstice, meaning right now. And it's farthest from the sun. It's aphelion, about 2 weeks after the June solstice. It is changing very slowly, and I did link this article I found to whatreallyhappened.com. All right, one more phone call. Sammy in Salt Lake City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm hanging in there.
Right on. I got two things I want to say. I want to say Bitcoin is taking a bath, and I'd like to get your opinion on that. And secondly, on the Ron Gibson channel, which is where I watch your show, I'd like to send out a shout-out to Cryptic Thinker, and I'd like to make her dinner if we ever cross paths.
Okay, so we're turning our What Really Happened radio show into a Lonely Hearts Club?
Hell yeah, man. Cryptic Thinker's cool. She's a nice lady.
Oh, well, I hope she's listening to this right now. As far as the cryptocurrencies themselves...
She is. And she's a good lady. She's an old school.
Well, I hope you two successfully get together. And thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Again, the problem I have with cryptocurrencies, I understand the advantage of currency that is operating outside the clutches of the private central bank, but I still think for a monetary system to work, there has to be an underlying commodity value, and the cryptocurrencies do not have it. You can spend a huge amount of money on your computers mining cryptocurrency, but you can't convert that cryptocurrency back to all the electricity and everything you spent to get it. The commodity cycle is broken on that. All right, getting on back here, human-caused global warming, and there's all kinds of things out there. We mentioned that it's been snowing in the Sahara Desert. A lot of people are getting their snow. It's just a lot heavier. Apparently, the frustrated carbonazis are now out there calling on the U.S. military to instruct civilians to address climate change. Well, yes, let's all join hands and stop the Earth in its orbit, or figure out a way to put sunglasses on the sun, because climate change has always happened. It always will. It'll go on changing after we humans are long gone. And it's ridiculous to come out there and say, we have to address you about climate change. No, what they're saying is the U.S. military should come on out and force us to accept this dogma and accept that we have to pay carbon taxes and buy and sell carbon credits, which will make the purveyors of this scam insanely rich. And it's kind of like seeing somebody in Central Park who's doing the old shell game, only he's got a police officer there saying, you have to play. You have to play the shell game. And yes, you're going to lose money, but by golly, you have to play that shell game. That's about how honest this is. Okay, there is the music, and we're going to head on out of here in a little bit. I'm going to be spending a little bit of time with John Stedmiller after the station break, so stay tuned. I'm sure John has got a lot of interesting things to say. Meanwhile, take what you're learning here. Please share it all over your social media. Now that social media is filtered, go back to using email lists, direct contact. We're in a fight to get the truth out there against the tsunami of lies. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.